Okay. I took a little bit of a break for a little while just because, well, partially because I forgot to do any uploading and recording, but also, man, life is exhausting. But you know what's not exhausting? HeartCatch Pretty Cure, the movie fashion show in the flower capital. Really? Which, man, the titles for these films kind of just gets longer and longer, and it's really a little funny that they continue to do that kind of stuff. But it's a good movie. With a series as good as HeartCatch Pretty Cure, I figured there wasn't much of a way that the movie could end up standing on its own, but I think that the HeartCatch movie does an incredibly good job of living up to the standard carried by the rest of that season, and the series as a whole. I watched this one a couple of times with a couple different people, and I enjoyed it each time. And I watched it again here recently, just before going to do this actually, so I could refresh myself on the film, get a little bit of that brain juice flowing, because God knows it's not usually. And even those who hadn't made it through the main season of HeartCatch Pretty Cure also enjoyed the film. I thoroughly enjoyed the Baron as the villain of this movie, and the little guy, Olivier, who's voiced by Tony Chopper, was also pretty fun. And all of the Pretty Cures got to have their own cool moments throughout the film. I was surprised by how well the film tied itself to the main series, and I was even more surprised when later on in the main season, it's like the second to last episode or something, the Baron and Olivier are mentioned in the main season, which is just so cool. A lot of the films in this series for each season are kind of things that stand on their own. They typically aren't taking place in a defined spot in the season. It's just another day where they're going about their Pretty Cure adventures, but instead of, oh, this is what we're dealing with today, it might be a couple of days, or today's dealing with Monster of the Week just happens to be a little bit longer than a lot of the others. And this one kind of fell into that a little bit, but is much more defined in its connection to the rest of the season. And as we saw later in the actual season itself, a very clear connection. There's always the question of whether the movies are canon or not. And I may have stated this before at some point, but I have elected to decide that the movies are all canon and it doesn't matter, because there are no rules just right. And so I think it is really fun to just assume everything is canon. It doesn't matter if it is or isn't a lot of the time. So I think it is more fun to just kind of operate under the assumption that it is canon. And this is one of those movies where it's like, oh yeah, we'll just assume this takes place during the course of the series and the course of the adventures that these girls are going through. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And then the show goes out of the way to go, hey, you remember that movie? Yeah, so do we. We're not going to pretend like it didn't happen. Which is just kind of fun, because HeartCatch Pretty Cure is kind of peak all the way through. The animation in this movie is also really good. Like, they always tend to hit it out of the park on the movies. There are a couple smaller pieces every now and then that aren't as good. A lot of the time, it tends to be when they just start trying to use CG for it. The main antagonist in his final phase of the Fresh Pretty Cure movie was just kind of okay. But the HeartCatch movie must have had a larger budget, because it is consistently solid all the way through. They do utilize CG in the film, but in a much more subtle way, and I think to the benefit of the film, because it's really mostly early on when Tsubomi and Olivier are being chased around by the Snackies and their little bat form. There's quite a bit of CG used in that section of the film, but it's not bad overall whenever it is used in the movie. It doesn't take away from the experience or distract in any way. It's just what happens to be used for the animation style in that section. And anytime it is used, it's masked well to blend into the rest of the scene. There's nothing that stands out dramatically about it. Honestly, I'm a little surprised they didn't use more CG for the final piece of the film, which I kind of want to talk about immediately, but I'll be going in circles and flipping back and forth. So I'll try to talk about that a little bit after. But yeah, HeartCatch Pretty Cure seems to be peak in pretty much everything it does. Like I said a little bit earlier, the Baron is a very fun villain to contend with, even up through the point where he takes on the long-lived PreCure tradition of the main antagonist turns into a big monster, so legally they are allowed to kill him. That we all love so much. Parentheses. I don't care for it as much. It's like not my favorite trope. I kind of talked about that a little bit, but turning into a big monster as the final antagonist of the movie. So many films do that, and I guess I get that it's to show off the budget of the film and show off their big blockbuster hits. Like, that's the draw, that's the appeal. Everybody loves the big fight at the end, the big dramatic climactic battle. But I think there are other fun ways to do that that don't involve the giant monster. But again, it's kind of just a children's film. Kids love big monster hit stuff. That's fine. That's good stuff a lot of the time. And it was pretty good stuff here. Like, it wasn't a bad turn into a big monster. He didn't get to be a big monster for long, which is a little unfortunate, but it was still cool when he was. And they were legally allowed to kill him, and they did that. Although I feel more and more like they don't end up killing him and the other final enemies, which is a little funny because they do kill pretty much every other antagonist they come across in HeartCatch, but they don't do that to this guy. Probably because it's a pretty different situation that they find themselves in, but they do leave the Baron alive at the end of the film, giving him and Olivier a chance to reconnect after the nightmare that was the last little bit of their lives. Across Olivier turning into a punching machine, and the Baron turning into an actual dragon, just, like his name suggests, salamander, and back and forth betrayal across the entire film, considering the Baron put shards of his magic they'd collected inside of Olivier to store them, and Olivier stole his staff, so the Baron couldn't use his magic, and the entire time that they knew each other, the Baron was planning on using Olivier to destroy the world, but then he's like, well, a little bit of a change of heart only destroyed the seal on my magic. Which kind of made for an interesting turn, because throughout the movie, we are aware that the Baron is a desert apostle, but he is a desert apostle in name alone, because as they point out several times in the film, he doesn't act like any of the other desert apostles they meet. He's not interested in going out of his way to destroy the world or to fight the Pretty Cure. Like, he hates them, don't get me wrong. He says that straight up. But he also might be talking a big game compared to how he actually feels. He has been imprisoned for thousands of years, potentially. I don't remember if we get an exact timeline on when the Desert Apostles first came to Earth, but when they arrived, we are told that Baron Salamander is one of the people who was originally with the king of the Desertarians, and that he was one of the people who came to Earth and was beaten by the first Pretty Cure, Cure Anji, and imprisoned by her after the fact. Now, that's another interesting point, is that she could have also just blown him to pieces and didn't, and imprisoned him instead, and that kind of festered his hatred for the Desert King and just the Pretty Cure. But at a certain point in the movie, he seems to understand that maybe they could have destroyed him. And I think part of that comes with the change of heart he has. He doesn't tell Olivier or Lou Garo to destroy the world, like Olivier thinks he's going to, like all the Pretty Cure thinks he's going to. He just kind of tells him to destroy this place that held the seal on his magic. Now, he does turn into the big monster so he can try to destroy the world, but he's not putting that on Olivier, he's putting it on himself, because he is the one who doesn't think he can change anymore. Because after encountering the Pretty Cure and learning what it means to be a person, Olivier wants to change, he wants to be better, and by wanting to change as a person and wanting to change his situation, he kind of already has. Initially, he was content to basically just be used the entire time the Baron and him were in their travels. He understood that the Baron wanted to collect his magic and to destroy the world. And much like the Baron, he had been disillusioned by life because he had been abandoned and orphaned. We see this in the flashback where we first learn of how they met. He is a young child in a church alone, praying to the Archangel Michael for a wish to be granted. We don't learn what that wish is until after he meets the Baron, and that he wants a mother and father. And then they're like, well, let's go look for them together, because I don't have one of those either, which is kind of fun. But we see the same sort of abandonment that the Baron outright states reflected in Olivier, which is probably part of why he took him in and felt bad for him and grew to like and appreciate him, even if throughout a lot of the film he is just using him and is very clear about the fact that he is only using him to destroy the world and get his revenge because he's been in prison for hundreds and hundreds of years. We know it's like 400 years since he's seen anyone who's heard his voice when Olivier shows up. We don't know how long it is before that, which is, you know, that's how it goes when you're a bad guy in a magical girl anime, or a bad guy in any anime, actually, where there are mythical godlike beings and they kind of imprison you for hundreds and hundreds of years. But you don't go crazy in there. Like, he's chilling. He's a little disheveled and he's got that old man yaoi energy going on, but there's nothing wrong with him other than that. He's just sad and full of, ooh, I hate the world. Ooh, I want to destroy it so bad, but not in an aggressive way, in a I'm going to plot my revenge kind of way. I do find it a little hard to believe. There's a scene early on where Olivier recognizes the type of flower that Tsubomi is giving him his name after, because it is Tsubomi that names him. It's a little funny that he recognizes the Osthemis flower, I believe it is. Osmanthus flower, my mistake. And I think it's a little funny that this little orphan boy who's raised to be kind of a thief almost with his sleight of hand, but also raised to become a werewolf, knows flower names and like kind of flower meaning a little bit. But again, I guess he was raised by a desert apostle, so it makes sense that he would actually know a little bit about the flowers. And it is just fun how they incorporate flowers into the film. Like, that's most of HeartCatch Pretty Cure, is finding some way to incorporate the theming of flowers. They're in the flower capital of Paris. They go to just a real ass location in the world. Like, that's just a real city that they are in for funny magical girl anime. And not a lot of the series does this, where they go to a real place that is a named Earth location. Like, they'll be in Japan, but a lot of the time it's a made-up town or a made-up place, or they just kind of won't name it so they can have some sort of allusion to where they are, but not directly put any location markers on it. And they'll do more later in the series where certain seasons will be like, yeah, we're in Hawaii now. And it's always kind of fun. But it's very funny to me seeing them just go to Paris after being in more nondescript locations. More on the sort of style of how everything is presented in this movie. In addition to the animation, the backgrounds that they choose to use in a lot of scenes are incredibly pretty. Like, they have eye catches and all that, but they have a lot of what look like very nice painted backgrounds for a lot of shots. A lot of this film focuses on the fact that once the full moon hits, Olivier is going to turn into a werewolf and maybe try to destroy the world, maybe not. And the result of this is that a lot of the shots take place at night or in the evening especially. And there are several shots of just cloudy skies with orange and reds colors of the sun shining through the clouds. We have some God rays coming down a little bit, peeking through. We have shots of the sea and the sunset hanging over the horizon and trees or cities in the distance. There are several shots just of Paris that they appear to have also painted in a similar manner. And they do a lot to show off this artistic talent for the course of the film, which serves as kind of a nice juxtaposition for the characters, because the characters in this film often tend to have very thick outlines, very bright colors. Our main characters are hot pink and like almost a neon blue, and then a very bright orange and yellow. And Cure Moonlight actually blends in a little bit more into the sort of later time of day portions of this film, as she's sort of light purples and lavender and lilac and all that sort of good, cool color combination stuff. But it's really nice seeing that fit well with our antagonist of the film, the Baron, because he is clad in very dark clothing and has a lot of red theming to him. His name is Salamander. He uses fire magic. He turns into a dragon. Like, that just kind of makes sense. And he's at the end of his run. The setting sun sort of represents the effect he is about to have. He is about to try to go through the end of the world. He knows he's dying. He knows his body is falling apart. He's been imprisoned for hundreds and hundreds of years. He is a setting sun because he is about to die. And he knows this. And he is going to carry out his revenge at the cost of his own life. And even before he gets his full power back, the Baron is shown to be a very strong opponent. Like, all of the Desert Apostles are very strong. They aren't people that the Pretty Cure can 1v1 for most of the series. It takes until they get power-ups and strengthen the bonds of their friendship and all that at the very end of the show to actually be able to 1v1 any of the Desert Apostles when they defeat Sassorina kind of early on in the show, honestly. Maybe not quite early, but a little ways in. They did it as a team. It was a group effort. And then by the end, they're able to kind of go crazy, go ham on the remaining Desert Apostles. And we see a similar situation here with the Baron, because he is able to go one-on-one, even without most of his power, against Cure Moonlight, who is pretty consistently shown to be stronger than Tsubomi at the very least, if not Tsubomi and Erika and Itsuki. And she is going ham on him. She's winning the fights that they are getting into briefly, but she does get power cliffed by Olivier when he accepts that he is a monster, which, I don't know how much of a fan of that part I am, but it's still good. It is him going through a very traumatic experience. And so it serves a narrative purpose that she loses. We can even chalk it up to her admitting a loss because he is in a place where just kind of fighting out the situation is not going to help him. If she just starts beating everybody around her, that's not going to serve any purpose and convincing him that the Baron's desire to destroy the world isn't the right action. But before they get to that point even, there is quite a bit of the film where, kind of like I was talking about earlier, they are going through a lot of interactions with Olivier. They're kind of teaching him how to be a human being. They're basically taming this wild animal, and it's a little funny as they teach him how to behave in a human environment and interact with normal, well-adjusted members of society. And each of the Pretty Cure get their own fun little one-on-one with him. Tsubomi has the earliest one, of course, where she jumps in the way and helps him and tries to get him away from the Snackies and the Baron. And they have a couple of fun, smaller moments here and there. Erica gets a moment when they're talking about fashion and kind of Tsubomi's whole deal and getting him to warm up to the idea of being friends. Itsuki talks about her background and why she's with them, why she is the way she is, kind of why she is a much tougher person than the other two, or at least to a certain degree, that aspect of her, as well as her ability to sort of behave how she feels rather than just keeping everything locked inside because of how she thinks she needs to act. That was something that she figured out by becoming friends with Tsubomi and Erica. And the conversation that he ends up having with Yuri is one that it's much deeper. It's much more about his background. But it's really cool to see each of them kind of go through different elements of his life and different elements of their lives with him. And it also serves as a nice reminder for anybody who might be coming to this theater who isn't familiar with the cast of the show and hasn't watched most of it, or isn't caught up on the film, or parents who are coming to the film with their kid and being like, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know what this is about. And they can be like, okay, all right, I get it. If they're paying attention at all. And if they're not, oh, well, doesn't matter. They're just tuned out, having a decent time while their kid enjoys the funny magical girls blasting everything and doing all that kind of fun stuff. But even though he complains throughout much of any and all of these encounters, I think that the film does a pretty good job of very subtly showing his adjustment to them over time, and the fact that even though he puts off a very tsundere attitude, he still, to some degree, cares about what they are saying. He doesn't totally reject everything he's saying. He's not a complete feral dog. Most notably, I think, during the interaction with Erica. He's standing over sort of by a window looking out as Erica's laughing at him, and he's like, you laugh too much, you're so annoying, you're so obnoxious, I hate you. But whenever he's walking over to her so she can make adjustments to his outfit as they prepare for their titular fashion show in the Flower Capital, he is very careful to avoid stepping on anything they have out on the floor. Now, they shouldn't have all that stuff out on the floor. They have magazines and cloth and fabrics and just shirts and stuff thrown everywhere. It should not have gotten this bad. But, you know, they're pressed for time. They're kind of rushing through all of this preparation stuff so they can get it done and go do their fun flower show, and they're having a fun time. Flower show, fashion show, and they're having a good time of it. But even though he is complaining about every little thing involved in the process of acting like a well-adjusted member of society, he's not stepping on their fabrics. He's not being rude about the fact that they are doing all this. He's complaining, but he's not outright hating it. The fact that he steps around very carefully all of the things on the floor to find like a clear path to the table Eric is working at kind of does a lot to show the kind of person that he is, and or I guess rather the kind of person he's wanting to be, rather than what he sees himself as, which is a monster and a tool and a reject by society. And this says a lot about society. Now, on a sort of note more about the VAs, if I had a nickel for every time this particular voice actor portrayed a kind of fun but ultimately tragic orphan who turned into a monster and lost control of themselves and considered them a monster until friends taught them how to be better themselves and appreciate who they are as other people see them, I'd have minimum 2 nickels. I'm not sure how many other roles like this voice actor has played, but Olivier is very similar in that regard to number 1 best doctor in the world, going to cure all diseases, maybe Tony Chopper. That's right, Tony Chopper, greatest character 2024, which is almost over. God, that's nuts. But anyway, in the scene where he kind of gets to fully become that monster he doesn't want to be when he's talking to the Baron, I thought it was kind of funny that he basically got to do a "we're not so different, you and I" to Baron Salamander as they are engaged in this conflict. They're having a fight because he's getting to do what he wanted to do and what the Pretty Cure encouraged him to do, of not having any regrets and being able to speak his mind and what he really wants to say to the Baron. And he's telling him, let's not destroy the world, let's just continue going on adventures together because we're family. That sounds nice, right? Come on. Be reasonable about this, he says. And Baron's like, no, I don't want to be reasonable. I want to be angry. And he's pulling the "we're not so different, you and I" card about how they were both kind of abandoned by the world, but they made a family out of each other. And that's the important part for him. He wants the Baron to see that that should be the important part for him too, because they don't need all of these other problems or all of these other distractions, because they can just be together. They can be a family together. They don't need to go look for other things. But, you know, you're in a magical girl movie. You gotta get beaten before you can see the error of your ways. And they do that. They show up and they fight him in a pretty brutal fight, actually, when Blossom and Marine are fighting Olivier when he's in full werewolf Loup-garou mode. He strangles them and slams their heads into walls and judo throws them and tries to step on their heads. Like, it's pretty intense stuff for a little bit there. And then while Blossom and Marine are fighting him, Moonlight and Sunshine go to fight the Baron while he fully tries to take control again of his magic power so he can turn into a dragon. And it's really cool that they split up to fight like this. It keeps the scene from getting too busy, but also goes to give them all their own individual cool moments. But I wish that they got to use Super Silhouette earlier, or the movie was a little bit longer so they could use Super Silhouette. I want to see them fight in Super Silhouette mode. They have it, and then all they do is use it to summon their big woman. All they use it for is summoning the HeartCatch Mirage Orchestra. And it's good. I really love the big woman who punches good and makes the bad guys explode. But the Dragon Ball Z fan in me wants to see the super modes used as super modes and not used as device summoning mode. But it's not a problem. It's just a minor preference, I suppose. It would be cool to see, but it's not a terribly big deal. That scene at the end actually also kind of has one of the more diegetic instances of the pretty cure, need your power, please lend us your power type scenes. They don't have the sort of tools that they do in a lot of the other films. They don't have the heart ones or the pretty cure toys that a lot of the other movies do. Of course, our funny dogs, our magical fairies, do have those. That we see them for about 3 seconds, maybe, as our little chiffre and coffre and potpourri are screaming into a camera being filming the explosions that are happening where the pretty cure are fighting. And they use that to try to get the pretty cure their power so they can power up to beat the Baron, because their HeartCatch orchestra is failing initially before they give it some more juice. But they don't just fully break the fourth wall about it at first. They are filming this. This is on TV. People are watching this, and they give the pretty cure their power. I'm not convinced most of them know what that means. They've had a couple of reports in the film about the werewolf that's been running around, but they don't report on the fireballs that are being thrown around as the werewolf is being chased by the Snackies earlier in the film. We don't see that at all, which is kind of wild, but we do see the explosions from the Magical Girl fight, so whatever, I guess. But they do lend the pretty cure their power, and the pretty cure do win, and they get their golden glow super form to beat the Baron. I guess it's a little unclear if they just... I guess in purifying him, they fixed the problem that was destroying his body. Because he does end up looking like he's going to survive at the end of the film. I think it would have been a lot more dramatic for longer if he was going to just die immediately after they beat him. But I think it would have been maybe not a disappointing, but I think it would have been a worse off ending if they had done that. Like, he's a very fun antagonist. He's not actively evil to them through most of the film. He's just kind of a whimsical, silly man who also happens to want to blow everything up. But this movie is really good. It's a very strong film, perhaps one of the strongest in the franchise, for a really good season. And it's just a good time. It's just a good watch. Like, this is a 10 out of 10 film. It's so choice. I really wish more of the films were like this one, but I'm glad that they all kind of do their own things. And, like, of course, each season is going to have to do their own things. All the characters are pretty different. The sort of emotional tension that Tsubomi goes through wouldn't work with someone like Peach, because Peach is maybe more of an airhead than Tsubomi is, but she's also way more upfront about her emotions and way less shy about being in your face about them. Whereas Tsubomi, as the film points out, is someone who has had to work to get past any sort of reservation she has about interacting with people and being a human being. And they make a point of showing off that change in the film. I think it's cool that they do that, especially knowing this comes after the episodes where they get the HeartCatch Mirage and have to learn how to change and grow as a person. It's just a good time. It's good film. It's good stuff. Now, kind of on a different note, well, not kind of, entirely on a different note, as I've kind of gotten deeper into doing these, and as I've gotten busier, I might need to slow down on making these. I want to keep doing these. I think it'll be very fun to keep going on these, but I have a lot of things I need to be working on outside of this. But I do want to keep making these, so it's not going to stop, but I may try to take like a week off between them and try to just get other work done. Plus, I don't want to catch up to where I am. I still have a lot to get through in terms of talking about Pretty Cure before I get to where I am watching Pretty Cure. But I don't want to just immediately catch up and then have to take another break after, which I'm probably going to have to anyway, actually, now that I think about it, because ain't no way I'm going to be able to watch at the pace I was for a while. But yeah, it may slow down a little bit. We'll see.